And away we go. You know what? I can't be asked today for some reason. But you know what? Screw that. I'ma do it anyway. So, let's see what goes on in the news at this time of the week. Trump says he may punish countries with tariffs if they don't back the US controlling Greenland. Good grief. On January 16th, 2026, President Donald Trump threatened tariffs on countries that do not support US control of Greenland at a White House health event, but gave no tariff details. The administration says Greenland is vital for US national security and mineral resources, with President Donald Trump first proposing acquisition in 2019 and renewed talks this week involving US Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Deployments and high-level meetings occurred as European nations dispatched small contingents to Greenland, and a group of US lawmakers met Danish and Greenlandic leaders in Copenhagen to lower tensions. Denmark and NATO partners rejected US control of Greenland, while some 75% of the American public oppose acquisition, and US Congress members introduced bills to block annexation. US Special Envoy Jeff Landry plans a March visit to Greenland and said, "I do believe that there's a deal that should and will be made once this plays out, while officials will meet regularly in a working group." I'm done with this, okay? It has to stop. It's either do it or don't do it. And even if there are people with one or the other option, something is going to be done. Now, of course, there are minerals in Greenland that any country would want to take over and extract. And of course, given Greenland's geographic positioning towards the Arctic Circle, it makes sense to have military bases in a landmass that's the closest to the Arctic Circle, in case you want to take over what is currently blobs of ice and make a unlogistically possible civilization beyond all comprehension. Now, wouldn't that be exciting? Well, as if you enjoy being in the cold. Brr. Well, I don't mind the cold, but too much is too much, I would say. And same thing could be said with the heat. Don't mind the heat, but too much is too much. And especially if you get too dehydrated and you officially kick the bucket far too soon than you should. So, back to the story about Trump punishing countries with tariffs if they don't back the US controlling Greenland. Personally, I'm not bothered with countries negotiating, and unless people in said territory or country agree to be under particular sovereignty, it is their place, their community, so it is their choice at the end of the day. However, unless there's agreement from both the people that live in the communities that's yet to be annexed, if it does go ahead, and especially if there aren't, and unless there are also agreements from people living in the country that's going to do the annexing, this is most of the time. You can't just do stuff and think you get away with it without paying some kind of consequence. But of course, Trump has done many things in his first term that many people would argue he should have been called out. He should have paid the prices for his consequences. Where's any of that? And even after Trump's first term, with Biden in the White House, couldn't Biden done something to, well, other than say that Trump has not been a good president during his first term, he did this, did that, how awful, I'm here to fix everything, Biden says. And it's not just Biden. What about the International Court of Justice? Where were they last time Trump was the US president? were they going to do anything about it? And if they do, what grounds would Trump be prosecuted under? I'm just saying, things didn't go the way that it should have done, given heavy criticism and outcry. Something ain't right. I'll leave it at that. Something ain't right if things do not pan out the way they should, as we believed it should have panned out. And again, with the tariffs, I'm not saying it's a bad idea, but also not a good one either, especially the scale it's going to be implemented and especially if it's all going to be panned out all at once, like a quick shock. Like, oh my gosh, sudden change, what are we going to do? You got to give people time to adjust to these changes, especially if it's so damn drastic. I'm not going to argue with the tariffs, but at least give people warning when the time comes about. Because so many people are relying on the US for everything, for anything and everything these days. And I'm glad there are countries like Japan, China, and even South Korea, despite the fact they heavily despise each other, they put aside their differences, negotiate some kind of trade deals, just in case, when the time comes about, which it will, when Donald Trump puts down the tariffs on everyone. It's going to be a lot more expensive to import something from the US than from other countries. But since China's in the picture, I don't think South Korea or Japan has to worry all too much. At that point, they're set for life. If there is a life for the current government. That's pretty much the gist of it. That's all I have to say on that. But if people in such communities that are involved or will likely be infected, if they don't want to be taken over, then don't take over. It's so simple. But of course, there's going to be loopholes, workarounds that would happen otherwise because, well, you don't hear about it. We haven't complained about it when the time happened. And now, there you go. That's what happened. We weren't attentive enough. We weren't questioning what's going on in this world. It's over for us, mostly. We can still continue to live, but there will be consequences if we don't speak out sooner. Social media platforms removed 4.7 million accounts after Australia banned them for children. Well, it's about time they'd done something. In the first days after December 10th, Australia reported that platforms deactivated over 4.7 million accounts belonging to children, according to E-Safety Commissioner Julie Inman-Grant. The Online Safety Amendment Act raises the minimum age to 16 and requires age verification to protect teens from algorithmic exposure and mental health harms, the Australian government said. Meta, parent of Facebook and Instagram, reported removing 330,000 Instagram, 1,073,000 Facebook, and 39 Thread users between December 4th and December 11th last year, and nearly 550,000 by the day after the ban. Communications Minister Anika Wells said the tally equates to more than 2 accounts for early Australian, aged 10 to 16, and eSafety is closely reviewing platform data for compliance. However, Reddit is complying but has sued the government to overturn the ban, while regulators noted spikes in alternative app downloads that did not sustain usage, Grant said Friday. Now, where do I begin? And I'm not just talking about concerns about not allowing children or teenagers to access social media. I'm also talking about how the Australian government was just handing out the ban to begin with. Whilst the Australian government is committed to ensure anyone under 16 doesn't access social media, the day the ban happened, and you can look up any news reports by any outlet, mainstream, independent, medium scale, whatever, when they've interviewed the children that should have being affected, they said, "Oh no, I'm still using social media. They haven't banned me yet." A lot of them will say that the camera quality of their phone is so bad that the people doing the reviewing process believe that the young teen in question is above 16. That's what most likely children or teenagers would say when it comes to the verification of their identities. And of course, if there are reviewers accessing the cameras of smartphones of Australian children and teenagers, unless the camera quality of those phones are crystal clear, as they should be, then it's hard to tell, regardless of if they are above 16 or if they are below 16. And in fact, even if, and especially, there have been some people above 16 that had been banned because people thought, oh, they're not old enough to use social media, we should get rid of them. So, yeah, that we're allowing the government to. It's essentially this. How is it we're allowing governments to prevent children or teenagers to go online because of the harms that social media has? Why discussing the parents that should be responsible for whatever their children are doing online or what they're doing on their phones if they have any? It's still important. If the parents aren't doing the jobs that they should be doing to protect the children from any harm, whether it be in real life or digitally, then at some point the government is going to do that for you. When the government does it, by the time everyone complains, it's already too late. Why now are you complaining about what the government has done, which particular groups of people should be doing themselves in the first place? Not going after the people. But of course, it's no fun if the government is doing something that we should be doing to ensure our own safety of other people. And of course, I would also argue, what content would people say that is the reason that Australia is putting the social media ban in place in the first place? Of course, there are going to be content that is certainly not suitable for young children. I will give them that. To point on that particular aspect of explicit content which children should not be seeing at all, not just digitally, but in real life as well, at all, that cannot be the only reason why social media ban is put in place. There can be positives to social media if it's used with well thought out intentions, which unfortunately in most cases that is not the case. However, that's not to say there aren't people with well thought out intentions for the greater good. We just don't hear about them much because in this day and age, negativity is what really sells. And people love complaining. Not everyone, but most people instinctively they like something to talk about, and most cases when they talk about something, it's something negative. And it's working, it's absolutely working. Very effective, I'd say. Not that it's good, but it's still, if it works, it works. There's no arguing with that. You want to do something about it, then start an organization. Show the harms of online usage and what you can do to ensure the safety of yourself and others around you. So yeah, that's all I have to say on that story. And I think this is just as important in real life, in the physical world, as it is in the digital world. Amazon has launched a new Europe-based cloud service aimed at addressing user concerns over data privacy and sovereignty. The AWS European Sovereign Cloud is physically and legally separate from Amazon's other servers, allowing it to operate independently even if disconnected from the US. European regulators are investigating cloud services from Amazon and Microsoft under the Digital Markets Act to curb the power of big tech. Now, this could go either way. Firstly, anyone in the European Union that's saying that, well, we shouldn't let big tech take over our digital identity and our data, which, fair enough, that is a very valid argument. Even if there are regulations and rules put in place for big tech are going to find ways around it. They can still operate under the new framework rules that's put in place by the European Union. The presence of these companies that are under the big tech umbrella are still going to continue to exist. And even if big tech does comply with European laws, they're still going to find ways to profit out of Europeans under the given rules that are put in place. Don't think the European Union has done something to take down the big guys, because they're still going to have the money to find workarounds to continue operating the services within the continent, whilst at the same time complying with whatever regulations that are put in place, which was to prevent any financial abuse or even exploitation of goods and services, if that's even a problem nowadays. If it is, fair enough, but still, I think most people would be smart enough to know that by now. And if not, they'll figure it out. They'll figure it out for themselves at some point. Just not today. Certainly not today. Other than the EU trying to curb around big tech's influence in Europe, I would also say the other aspect about how big tech themselves operate, even if they do get around these new regulations set by groups of countries around the world, and think, oh, we can continue operating our services. Fantastic. But of course, and I have said this many episodes ago, whilst the regulations in the European Union, there are a few of them that do have the intentions of ensuring the health and safety of people across the continent. I would say that there are likely regulations that are not too extreme, just far above the limit that's logistically necessary. And having strict regulation will likely hinder innovation to and but it does I will say that strict regulation does spark creativity on how companies can get around those regulations to whilst continuing their businesses. They are whilst finding workarounds to get around regulations, however challenging that might be, whilst still being able to be above the margins of profit or revenue generated for these businesses. For the most part, I'm not surprised that there is a European-based cloud service, not just by Amazon, but for any company. I think Amazon, given the size that it is, they would have to be the first to provide a European equivalent cloud service of any kind. Not just because of EU regulations and rules, but also because if Amazon wants to continue operating their goods and services worldwide, they are going to have to find ways to get around these regulations if they want to continue operating their services to people around the world. So yeah, let's see how this goes for everyone else. Only time will tell to see what is next for not just the European Union, but for Amazon as well. Here are 18 films we are excited to see. Okay. Pixar's Emeryville studio will debut two major films in 2026, including Toy Story 5 on June 19th, reuniting Andy and Buzz. Proven franchises and star directors are central to studio's 2026 release strategies as filmmakers reimagine classics like Emily Brandt's Wuthering Heights and lean on franchises such as Avengers and The Mandalorian. Pixar's Hoppers explores a robotic beaver observing critters, arriving around February 13th alongside Emerald Fennel's Radical Wuthering Heights, and other quirky projects. Industry observers say the packed slate should translate into strong box office returns, with Pixar's work positioning 2026 as a major cultural year for film. Across 2026's calendar, studios have scheduled tentpoles from March through December, including Project Hail Mary on March 20th, The Devil Wears Prada 2 on May 1st, and Disclosure Day on June 12th. Okay, so 2026, there's going to be a lot of films of major franchises coming out, and of course, new films as well, but with big name directors behind them. Whilst all of that sounds exciting, I have one thing to say on that. How will this pan out by the time these films reach theaters? Will they become a success, as the hype revolving around them says will do? Or is it going to just fall under its own weight and hype, like most major films have done for many years? Not because of terrible marketing, or maybe the story of this film isn't as what people hoped, but maybe it's because the age of going to the theaters to watch our favorite movies is long gone, unless physical theaters does more than just revamp the theaters, but they also go into like creating major events. If movie theaters provide cultural events that everyone could just come to, I'm all for that. However, there is one problem, which I just found out quite a while ago. If movie theaters of any size don't show any big name films by the time they are released, then next time that major studio is to release their next feature film, they're not going to go to that movie theater to promote this film for people to go watch, because I'm not sure what kind of contract it is, or if it even is a contract, or if it's just an industry standard. What I've realized is that a lot of movie theaters are constrained to only show big name films produced by big name studios the week they announce their release, and they have to show that film for as often they can, or as long as big name studios feel like they are satisfied. If not, or if it's not physically possible or logistically possible to show all the new feature films all at once, that said film franchise or theatre venue will not be considered to showcase the new studio's big name films. And that's not okay. Because what if the theatre venues wants to rerun old films that is of by popular demand by local community people? What if people in the community were asked to ask people running the local theatre venue, "Hey, I like this film. Do you think you could run a couple weeks of this old film from the 90s just for 1 week so that all my buddies can come see it?" And then the people running the theatre venues would say, "Yeah, sure, we can run this for a week or two." And they do that, and then tons of people from the current landscape that is social media hear about this particular theatre venue re-showing an old movie from the 90s. They come over from all corners of the globe to that particular theatre venue to watch that particular movie from the 90s. So much money is generated for the theatre venue, not just from tickets or even the popcorn, but also from the parking if people are coming from far away. That's what I like to see. Except this is reality, and reality is unfair. And what is also unfair is how big name studios are bossing around the small theatre venues to do whatever satisfies them, and if the theater venues don't do what the big studio says, you're off the list. We're not gonna use you to show our new feature films ever again. And that's very sad and unfortunate. But the balance of the two, I would say. What's been done has been done. Maybe there could be a resurgence in small theater venues to continue to rerun old films that has released a couple of years ago, maybe very old films as well, if it's possible to show them in some digital form. But that alone is not going to be enough if big studios are loose with their negotiation with these small scale theatre venues. I think there has to be some kind of big cultural event promoted and organized by the theatre venues themselves, movie theatres themselves, to attract attention and bring people in to begin with. That's the way to go, and a good place to start. Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado confirmed on Thursday that she presented US President Donald Trump with her 2025 Nobel Peace Prize medal during a meeting in Washington, a highly symbolic gesture intended to honor what she described as his historic role in advancing freedom in Venezuela. A White House official later confirmed Trump accepted the physical medal during the Oval Office meeting. Wow. I wonder how people would react to that. Back when the no back when Nobel Peace Prize was yet to announce a winner, like before Matador even won it, it was between her, people knew about it, but people were worried that Trump was going to win it. Because groups of people, when they've heard about Trump, about what he's doing anywhere in the world, they don't seem to like it. They don't like what Trump is doing with his international diplomatic missions. And people that don't like Trump would want anyone else to win it, so long as Trump doesn't win it himself. And by the time Maria Machado won the Nobel Peace Prize, at first, a lot of people were very excited. Yay! Someone, not Trump, has won it! And then, when she gave her acceptance speech, she then dedicated to Trump. And then that was that particular moment that a lot of people, mainly on the left, realized they screwed up. Big time. Well, no, not big time, but at least they kind of screwed up to some extent. And now, from what I just read, from the Polymarket Instagram account, not on Ground News where I usually reach these stories, that when Machado came to Washington D.C., she then handed over her Nobel Peace Prize to Trump. A lot of people did not want Trump to win it, or even get hands on a Nobel Peace Prize at all. So, yeah, it's not a good day for the Trump haters. It's not a good day. But that's life. Life is going to be unfair, and even if things in life get really bad, things will only get better, and they will get better. So long as you realize that the worst that has happened will likely not happen for a very, very long time. So, yeah. And look, Machado wanted to give Trump the Nobel Peace Prize, so she did not have to give the Peace Prize to him. She wanted to do that because, in her eyes, in her perspective, she believed that what Trump has done in Venezuela has been a positive contribution to restoring the peace in the country. I can't get any simpler than that. A lot of Venezuelans are so glad with what Trump has done in Venezuela. Even Venezuela's opposition leader in the Venezuela's lower house was willing to give her Nobel Peace Prize that she won for her efforts in Venezuela giving it to Trump, as she believes he did more effort in providing peace to Venezuela than she had. That's how the situation looks from my perspective. There's nothing else to say on that. Freddie Mercury's secret daughter passes away aged 48. On 15th of January 2026, Thomas, BB's widower, confirmed she passed away aged 48 after a long battle with chordoma, and her ashes were scattered over the Alps. The book Love, Freddie, published last year by Leslie Ann Jones, revealed a previously unknown daughter known as B, the letter B. Using 17 handwritten notebooks and extensive research, Jones wrote that BB told her she had a close, loving relationship with Freddie Mercury during his final years. And Jones says her research included DNA verification treated as private. Following the confirmation, family members said they were weighing the release of photographs she kept private. Well, Mary Austin, Mercury's close friend and former fiancée, denied knowing of any child or diaries, and band associates reacted with skepticism. The book reports Bibi Cordoma was diagnosed in childhood, and her health worsened during 4 years Jones worked on the project. Only Freddie Mercury's inner circle knew of her for almost 5 decades. Well, firstly, rest in peace to Freddie Mercury's secret daughter. I send my condolences to her friends and family. And whatever the reason that people had no idea that Freddie Mercury even had a daughter, that has not been made known to the public, I understand that there are people that don't want to get into the limelight or to be bombarded with so much attention, given the fact this woman was related to Freddie Mercury. It's understandable that there are people that don't want to get into the fame lifestyle or to only be known as the daughter of Freddie Mercury. Understandable. Everyone in the whole world now knows that Freddie Mercury had a daughter, and that daughter is unfortunately no longer alive. So I say again, rest in peace. Trump floats cancellation of midterms in Reuters interview. On Thursday, President Donald Trump told Reuters he thinks the US shouldn't even have midterms, voicing frustration that Republicans might lose control of Congress in November. Trump told House Republicans earlier this month that Democrats would find a reason to impeach me if they regain congressional control, urging them to win midterms after Representative Al Green's December 10th, 2025 impeachment resolution was tabled to 140. Trump also pushed the SAVE Act, while claiming, now, I won't say cancel the election. They should cancel the election because the fake news will say he wants the election cancelled amid real clear polling showing Democrats 46.4% versus Republicans 42.1%. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said Thursday that Trump was speaking fatuously, while federal law bars any president from canceling elections set by Congress and run by state and local election officials. And critics warn his voter fraud claims risk eroding election trust. November 3rd, 2026 is the scheduled date for the midterms, with Polymarket prediction market showing a 44% chance of a balance of power and Republicans pursuing redistricting efforts. Now, I've heard so much on social media about how the UK's local elections were to be cancelled or to be delayed by a couple of years because of reorganising its district outlines amid establishing new regional mayoral positions like to be the mayor of Greater Manchester, mayor of Tyne and Wear, the mayor of the West Midlands metropolitan area, and so on. I've heard a couple of comments on social media comparing how the UK are cancelling local elections, yet by the time, but yet back when Trump was in his first term, Biden when he came in after Trump's first term, and then now Trump currently in his second term, there haven't been much reports, if any, about any local elections being cancelled at any level. I'm not saying that US elections of any level have been cancelled. I just haven't heard anything about elections in the US being cancelled. But yeah, every year, well, ever since the new current government of the UK got in, local elections have been cancelled for the year and to be delayed for the following year, or maybe 2 years, but certainly the following year. And people in the UK are not happy by that. Now, even if Trump was to advocate for cancelling local elections in the US, well, that will not be possible because there's Congress and there's state and local level electoral officials that have to give the final say about if these elections in their communities were to go ahead. So next time you hear anyone in the US complaining that, oh, Trump wants to cancel local elections in the US, that won't be possible. Even if Trump wanted to, that will not be possible. Election officials at both the local and state level have to have the final say about those elections going ahead, as well as having Congress having the final say, both the representatives and the senators. So there's so many hurdles to actually cancel elections in the US, unlike in the UK that, well, of course, councillors in local councils in the UK can say if they want elections to go ahead for the year or delay it by a couple of years. But of course, the UK government in question, if they decide to push back elections at local level, it goes ahead without any hesitation. So yeah, it is easy to cancel or delay local elections in the UK, but the US, there's a lot to go through to even make the possibility of cancelling or delaying local elections in the US a reality. So yeah, that's my take on it. That's my perspective. That's going to be a challenge for anyone wanting to stop US elections. If people ever agree to it, which they won't, they certainly will not agree to that. Stock markets take breather at end of turbulent week. On Friday, global stock markets mostly retrenched while US futures edged higher as the first week of earnings season closed, reflecting mixed investor sentiment. After a US-Taiwan trade pact was announced, the agreement cuts tariffs on Taiwanese goods to 15% in return for $250 billion in new US tech investments, lifting Taiwan's benchmark nearly 2% despite a protest from China. Corporate earnings showed a split picture, with Pittsburgh PNC up 3.2%, T Bank rising 1%, and James B. Hunt tumbling close to 4%. Well, TSMC's profit jumped supported Taipei's market. Investors pared back as European equities and the Dow Jones Industrial Average slipped into negative territory on Friday, with Patrick O'Hare, Briefing.com analyst, noting a kind of a rollback in the mega-cap stocks and semiconductors. In the coming weeks, analysts expect tech and AI-related companies to face greater scrutiny as U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick warns semiconductor firms risk 100% tariffs if they avoid U.S. plans. I don't have much to say on the story. I will say, if you're ever going to invest in the stock market, which you don't have to, no one is going to force you to get into the stock market because it's very complicated and there's so much at risk if you invest all at once. You just got to be cautious about what you are investing yourself into, as well as why these stock prices of these companies are falling to begin with. You can never be too careful. And if you are going to invest for the first time, don't think this is like a weekly, daily thing you get yourself into every now and then. You have to think about the long term as well. Industries, sectors, labor, and economies, they can fluctuate depending on the needs, the demands of the people, and what businesses are doing so well at particular times of the year. And if people don't swiftly adjust or adapt to such changes with little worry, if any, then you will lose out. Always know what you're getting yourself into when investing into anything. And again, if people don't want to, they do not have to. So I'm scrolling onto Threads, and I saw this. A Threads post by, one word, Jacob Aaron Libby. Look at this! And just imagine how much worse it's gotten in the last 2 years. And the picture in question that's showing is the just I'm not sure what you call it, but it shows Ukraine's not just Ukraine's population, but also a breakdown of Ukraine's demographic, like how many people within Ukraine are in Ukraine, and at what age, and how many people in Ukraine are of a particular age. Like for example, at least the, there's more than any Ukrainian men and women. They both of them each have at least more than 300,000 Ukrainian men and women that are at the age of 40, and there's at least 200,000 Ukrainian men and women that are at least that are of 65. The one aspect of this chart for Ukraine's population that this person on Threads is showing is there's parts of the age demographic chart where there is a pizza-shaped chunk between Ukrainian men and women that are aged between the ages of 13 up until 35 for both Ukrainian men and women. And if you haven't paid attention to what's going on in Ukraine since 2022, a lot of people in Ukraine got themselves involved in their military to combat Russian military forces after Russia brought in their military into Ukrainian territory. And yeah, this is very sad. It really is. And even though people will argue that those people that maybe the Ukrainian men and women that are aged 13 to 35, maybe they're not dead. They could have immigrated to Europe, Germany, Poland, the United Kingdom, Germany. I'm not sure I said Germany. Sweden, or other countries in Europe to flee the war. And that could be true. However, even if that was the case, there is a chunk of Ukrainian men and women aged between 13 to 35 that are not there. Make of that information as you will. Lives were lost since 2022 between Ukraine and Russia, and whatever's happening, it has to stop. It's absolutely awful. I think even both Ukrainian and Russian people want the war to stop. Not just to say that they did that and they did this. No, they want the war to stop because they had enough of hearing about the negativity between the two. And even if there are differences between the two countries, and they do not agree on anything, or if anything, they just want to go on with their lives without having to think about how do I protect myself? How do I survive in this harsh climate? No one should live like this. And even if there had been people that have lived in such conditions years ago, it shouldn't have happened to begin with. I think if people that live in countries where their militaries would never get into war, if they got involved in the front lines, not 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 that they should, not that they should ever get too violent. I believe it's important that people understand if they go into the military, or if people ask, why should we care about countries going to war and what happens to people in those countries? You take them to those countries just to observe. They don't have to fight. They should at least observe what is going on in these countries, as to get an understanding of how people in those countries get by in life despite war efforts, military action, and cultural differences amongst people around the world. No amount of knowledge you take up in college, university, or any education institution will ever surmount or surpass having to experience the said knowledge for yourself in the real world. To experience something that you've been taught gives you so much than any academic knowledge could ever provide you. Whatever goes on between Ukraine and Russia, again, it has to stop. As valid the arguments there are for why the two countries are in this war to begin with, enough with the violence. Enough with the people losing their lives to defend their own countries. And even if there are people defending their country for the others, what about the few that are in Ukraine that are not fighting on the front lines, that continue living their lives? Which I have no problem with. We should all continue to live our lives how we want to live our lives. Yet, how is it possible to have two separate realities where one side of the country is military men or women going on the front lines, going against another country's military to risk their lives, and then the other side of the country is, well, people just living their lives normally, which again, everyone should. Yet, they want to continue living their lives normally, but they don't want to put themselves at risk to defend their own country. Not because trying to figure out. And it's not just Ukraine. I'd say the same thing with Russia. Whilst there are people in the Russian military fighting against Ukraine, its military, a lot of people in Russia are continuing living their lives. How come they're not worried? Well, not just because the country's so big, it's just people that aren't militarily involved. They don't know the aspect or the depth of why their countries are in war to begin with. Unless people experience what's going on in this world now, then they're not going to care enough about these problems. Regardless, and either way, on situations are like this, something has to be resolved in hopes that we can live our lives in peace, harmony, and tranquility, not having to worry about if we're going to live another day, I hope a solution comes about really soon. And that is it for this episode.